My name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I am doing an original book tag that I came up with called the Book Palate Tag. So this is in reference to people talking about their palates being sophisticated, well-developed, nuanced, or unrefined, or eclectic, or what have you. There's prompts like that. And then the main prompts, though, are just your specific tastes, which would be falling into sweet, sour, bitter, or salty. And yes, this is because I watched this show, Sweet Bitter. The first prompt is sweet. What is a book that made you excited to read more by that author? Bonus point if it also somehow exemplifies the genre you most like to read. For this, I chose Megan Gale Cole's book, Small Game Hunting at the Local Coward Gun Club. And this is to my taste for numerous reasons. It is very critical of racism in Canada, sexism, misogyny, violence against Indigenous people. It is called Newfoundland Noir, which is amazing. And so it has noir properties. It's very incandescent in its voice. It's not concerned with niceties or platitudes. It drills down into the everyday microaggressions and misogyny that people face in a very small town. This place couldn't have racism, but there's some shady, wild stuff happening in town. Lots of sort of in-group, out-group thinking, and is just really good at displaying the sort of microaggressions that women have to deal with every day and how it's like violently impacting their lives all of the time. And the story overall is just fantastic. A runner-up for this as well, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt was the first book that I read by her, and it absolutely made me pick up The Secret History and The Little Friend, which I have not yet read, but will do so this year. So, as to my tastes, the noir aspect, confronting the patriarchy, confronting misogyny, confronting sort of general intellect about a specific thing, and as well, the literary fiction genre is just something that I'm usually reading these days. Next prompt is sour. What book did you initially dislike, but after a reread, you reversed your opinion on? Or, what is a book you loved at one time and after rereading it have found it lacking in some way? Bonus point if the book is in a genre you similarly reversed your opinion on. So for this, young Fraser was enamored with Jim Morrison, who appeals to young white males everywhere, I'm sure. No One Here Gets Out Alive is probably the most famous, specifically for Jim Morrison, but in general, it is anecdotal, it has been disproven multiple points, and the appeal in general of Jim Morrison is for a younger man, in my opinion. Obviously his music is a lot more different than his actual personality, which is what this goes into more. But this has both critical and rose-colored glasses on the opposite respects of where it should be for Jim Morrison if you consume other content that examines his life. Even though I really connected with No One Here Gets Out Alive, I don't think I read another memoir until like 10, 12, 15 years later or something like that. And now I consume them pretty regularly, actually. Next up is Bitter. What is a book that you feel is underrated, attacked, unjustly by popular or mainstream opinion, or is simply misunderstood in some way? Bonus point if it is not a book anyone else has mentioned already, at least that you know of. So for this tag, I'm picking Twilight, which needs no introduction, I think. Don't get me wrong, I think it is commercial fiction. It's problematic in some ways. It's not very well written, but it is sort of fine for commercial fiction. And it really started a large controversy around, for one, men deriding women's careers. Twilight, at the time that it came out, was immensely popular, but divisive as well. And I think that it sort of is the paragon of the argument of certain groups of men attacking women for writing a certain kind of fiction that they don't agree with, don't like, puritanical about in some ways. Ironic considering the themes in Twilight. But they really did a huge amount of work in trying to personally harm Stephenie Meyer, deride the genre in general, and cast dispersions on it, sort of poo-poo it, shun it, say it shouldn't exist, and basically attempt to censor it in some ways. I think it speaks to a lot of way female authors in that space are treated and treated still, and how that fiction in general is treated by people that think that they know better. So I think it was mostly attacked rather than critiqued. And then the next prompt is salty. What is a book that changed how you thought about or related to other people, or that made you realize something about yourself you were not aware of previously? Bonus point if you choose multiple books from whatever milestones in your life that feel important to you. So for this, I chose 2 books for my sort of adolescence. I would choose For Love of the Game, which is a book I've talked about on my channel before, but essentially what made this book so important to me as a young person was it made me sort of realize and confront the fact that I have a lot of unresolved feelings for my relationship to my biological father, which didn't exist. I thought I was essentially fine with him not being in my life, and that it didn't affect me. He was never in my life whatsoever. I didn't know him. But as I read the book, a lot of hard to unpack stuff came about, in the sense of like, it's difficult to not know where you come from when you don't particularly identify at a personal level with some of the aspects of your male role models, shall we say. I felt quite different than my father, and I felt just sort of looking for something, and a lot of it is bound up, I think, in the way that I just never knew my biological father, basically. And his son had the manuscript printed posthumously, and it is for his son. And it's about a boy who essentially remains static as he is growing up, because he becomes a pitcher who's very popular but never kind of like grows up. And his father, if I remember correctly, doesn't live long enough to sort of really get to know the person that he is, but only sees him for his accomplishments in baseball, essentially. And so his personal lackings in the book derive particularly from that relationship. And there's like an ongoing dialogue about that in the book. And so I found that very compelling. It's one of the most read books in my library. I read it probably like once a year. When I used to travel around Canada for work, I would often get to a place, because I was isolated and sort of marooned from everybody else when I'm traveling. I used to travel 8 months out of the year, so I didn't really have any close friends. I lost touch with a lot of people. And so I would go to used bookstores, look for this book, and read it. And it was both a source of comfort, but conflict. So we do what we do. And then a book that I read maybe 2 years ago only, not when it was popular, but when a friend recommended it to me, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. And this book, I think everybody knows at this point. It is about, for me anyway, I'm not going to go into the plot and the summary and everything because I think everybody knows it, but why it was important to me to read was a lot of the defense mechanisms that the main character Jude deploys when he is talking with his friends or interacting with other people are things that I mirror unconsciously. I usually have people at like an arm's length. I try to center other people rather than myself, and a lot of other characteristics that would take forever to go into in a video. But many of the things that Jude deploys for his own safety, and ostensibly because he hasn't processed a lot of trauma and stuff. I also had, and it was just sort of like a scene moment, but also like realizing that about myself and trying to confront those aspects, because I'm essentially a very guarded person with very few friends, and live alone. And it's also things that naturally happened with my job that I mentioned before. Being transient for like 10 years out of your life does things to your personality and your social skills and whatnot. And so it was just sort of a light bulb moment for me in general with coming to those realizations. And so that's it for the normal prompts, but I also have additional ones that I call the connoisseur points, which I think is funny. So you can pick any of the following ones, and I say treat the following prompts as if they were different foods. Palates vary depending on what you're consuming, i.e. choose as many as you like. The first is sophisticated palate. Choose a book from your favorite subgenre, or that has your favorite trope or motif, or just go off regarding a bookish, nerdy thing that you like and enjoy. My favorite subgenre is cyberpunk, which is a subgenre of science fiction. It's self-explanatory what the name is, mostly high-tech, low-life, cyber characteristics, meaning the plot hinges usually on some kind of technology, or it is a main conceit, hinge, whatever, of the book. And then punk in embodying specific values from punk: anti-establishment, pro-action, anti-corporation, etc. One of the best and underrated books from this subgenre is Misha's Red Spider White Web, which is maybe the only Indigenous novel that I know of written by an Indigenous person. And it is very early cyberpunk, first wave, like 1992, 1993, something like that. This is a reprint, so it wouldn't tell me, I don't think. But this book is truly great. It embodies none of the problems that are found in first wave cyberpunk, which is marginalization, Orientalism, technophobia, etc. This is about a woman who is an artist, and the plot is essentially about a corporation trying to colonize, co-opt her art. She is barely getting by, sort of busking. Like she makes these things, it's not getting sold. They're very like intricate and intimate pieces of art that are technological in nature, and they keep trying to buy her out and go to a sort of Disneyland, basically, where all the artists are now and are working under a salary and are like very happy, ostensibly. Meanwhile, this part of the city is also being plagued by a killer who is going around killing all of the most marginalized people. It is exceptional commentary on sociological issues. It's very good characterization, sometimes very unsettling. There's chapters where you are second person, I believe, as the killer in the book, attacking these people. And so it really wants to get at the heart of these things and make you feel something, make you have empathy for these people. And some of the best quotes in cyberpunk ever are in this novel. It's fantastic. I'll leave a link below to the publisher's site. Next is Unrefined Palate. What is a book or genre that you consider a guilty pleasure, though you shouldn't feel actually guilty about reading anything, really, but hopefully you know what I mean. This, for me, is kind of a funny choice. My guilty pleasure is reading academia on cyberpunk, which is funny because it's the unrefined palette. I don't know why I feel guilty about this, but I never went to a post-secondary school after high school, and it feels sort of weirdly transgressive consuming academic work and then putting it on my cyberpunk blog and talking about it, discussing it, trying to evaluate it in a productive way without having been taught those skills. And it is I don't know why, but it feels like a guilty pleasure to me. So the second to last prompt is Eclectic Palate. What are the top 3+ genres you typically read or gravitate towards? According to Goodreads, this is fantasy, science fiction, graphic novels, contemporary, literary fiction, and young adult. And the last prompt is Maturing Palate. What is a genre you've read little or none of, but would like to sample more? What book, if any, prompted this? For this, I'd have to say Beth O'Leary's The Flat Share. I'd like to read more sort of weird contemporary romance. It's definitely the lowest thing that I've read, but I've actually found a few books this year, and this one being 5 stars for me just because of the specific themes and issues that it addresses within its pages. I found that romance can be surprisingly intersectional and interesting and moving. It seems like for me to like romance, it generally needs to be intersectional in some way, portraying marginalization in some way, or sociological themes in nature that underlie it or underpin it, or a through line for it. If it's just straight, steamy romance, usually I don't connect with it whatsoever. But before I had dismissed it out of hand that I wouldn't like it, having tried just a couple of them, and that is wrong. I've tried at least 3 that I can think of this year that I liked quite a bit. And that's it. That's the Book Palate Tag. Consider yourself tagged if you would like to do it, but I would also like to tag Beating Around the Books. Mark Nash, you said that you don't usually want to do tag videos lately, but sometimes you do. If you would like to, by all means. If not, nobody's hurting my feelings not doing this tag. Obviously, it's just a fun thing that I made. Bookish, misreads a lot, scallydandling about the books, Bob the Bookerer, and Sean the Book Maniac. Otherwise, that'll do it for me. I'll see you next video. Bye.